Long before the modern world measured progress in circuits and code, humanity built civilizations that mastered stone, metal, water, sound, and the sky itself. Their cities rose without steel, their machines moved without electricity, and their knowledge endured for centuries without paper or print. And yet, much of what they knew is gone, not evolved into something better, not replaced, simply lost. When we look at the ancient world through the narrow lens of modern assumptions, we imagine primitive people struggling against nature with crude tools. But the evidence carved into stone, buried beneath deserts, and scattered across oceans tells a very different story. It tells of engineers who could move stones weighing hundreds of tons with precision still unmatched today. Metallurgists who alloyed metals with techniques we cannot fully replicate. Astronomers who mapped the heavens with accuracy rivaling modern observatories. Doctors who performed surgeries we still struggle to explain. And architects who built structures that have survived earthquakes, floods, wars, and time itself. This is not a story of myths or legends. This is a story written in granite, copper, obsidian, and gold. A story of technologies that once existed, worked flawlessly, and then vanished. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, leaving behind questions we are still unable to answer. Consider the simple assumption that technology must always move forward, that each generation builds upon the last in a straight, upward line. History does not support this belief. Civilizations rise, peak, collapse, and often take their most advanced knowledge with them. Libraries burn. Skilled craftsmen die without apprentices. Oral traditions fade. Political upheaval erases specialized classes. And when civilization falls, what remains is often not its highest achievements, but its most durable ruins. In ancient Egypt, stone blocks weighing up to 80 tons were quarried, transported, lifted, and fitted together with joints so precise that even a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. These blocks were placed without mortar, aligned with cardinal directions to astonishing accuracy, and engineered to distribute weight in ways modern engineers still study with admiration. The Great Pyramid alone contains over 2 million stone blocks, many transported from quarries hundreds of kilometers away. And yet, no contemporary records describe machines used to build it. No blueprints. No toolkits. No written explanations. Only silence. Mainstream explanations often rely on massive labor forces using simple tools. But experimental archaeology has repeatedly shown that copper chisels dull quickly against granite. Wooden sleds struggle under extreme weight, and sheer manpower alone cannot account for precision achieved. Something is missing from the equation. Some method, some knowledge, some technology that did not survive the collapse of dynasties and the passage of millennia. And Egypt was not alone. In South America, the Inca built cities in the Andes using stones cut and shaped to interlock like three-dimensional puzzles. These stones were fitted together so perfectly that earthquakes passed through them without collapse. The builders had no iron tools, no wheeled transport, no written language, yet they reshaped mountains. At sites like Sacsayhuaman, blocks weighing over 100 tons were carved with complex angles and placed with millimeter precision. Even today, heavy machinery would struggle to replicate this work at such altitude. How is it done? The official answer is patience, hammerstones, and skill passed down through generations. But again, the tools found at these sites do not fully explain the results. The stones appear molded rather than cut in some places. Their surfaces are subtly curved, as if softened before placement. Some researchers have proposed chemical stone softening, acoustic vibration, or lost mechanical methods that allowed ancient builders to shape rock in ways now forgotten. Across the ocean, in ancient Mesopotamia, civilizations mastered hydraulic engineering thousands of years before modern dams. They controlled rivers, irrigated deserts, and built canals that transformed barren land into agricultural powerhouses. Their understanding of water flow, sediment control, and seasonal cycles was so advanced that when their systems collapsed, due to political fragmentation and neglect, the land reverted to desert. Modern attempts to replicate these systems often fail, not because we lack machinery, but because we no longer fully understand the ancient balance they maintained. Then there is metallurgy. The ancient world did not simply discover metals. It mastered them. Artifacts from ancient India show steel alloys known as woods, produced with carbon structures so advanced they rival modern material science. Roman concrete, mixed with volcanic ash, seawater, and lime, grows stronger over time and resists erosion for thousands of years. Modern concrete, by comparison, degrades within decades. Despite extensive research, we still cannot fully reproduce the exact chemical processes that gave Roman concrete its durability. In ancient China, bronze casting reached a level of complexity that defies explanation. Massive ritual vessels were cast in single pours using piece mold techniques that required precise temperature control and advanced knowledge of metal flow. These techniques disappeared after dynastic changes, replaced by less sophisticated methods. Knowledge was not preserved. It was lost. And perhaps most haunting of all is the technology we can see but not understand. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck, is a complex system of interlocking bronze gears designed to predict astronomical events with remarkable accuracy. It dates to over 2,000 years ago and contains mechanical complexity not seen again until the development of medieval clocks more than a millennium later. It should not exist, according to the standard narrative of technological progress. And yet it does. Who built it? How many others existed? And why did this knowledge disappear entirely? The answer may lie in how ancient societies transmitted knowledge. Unlike the modern world, where information is duplicated endlessly and stored digitally, ancient knowledge often lived in the minds of specialists. Engineers, metallurgists, astronomers, and architects belonged to elite classes, religious orders, or royal workshops. Their knowledge was guarded, symbolic, and sometimes intentionally obscured. When empires fell, these specialists were killed, scattered, or silenced. Their secrets died with them. Libraries were burned. The Library of Alexandria alone is said to have housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls, records of science, engineering, medicine, and philosophy gathered from across the ancient world. Its destruction was not a single event, but a series of losses over centuries. Each fire erased irreplaceable knowledge. Not copies, originals. We often imagine that if something was important, it would have been preserved. But history shows the opposite. The most fragile knowledge is often the most advanced. Ancient medicine provides another unsettling example. Surgical instruments found in Roman and Greek sites include tools for cataract surgery, brain procedures, and complex bone repair. Trepanation, drilling into the skull, was performed successfully thousands of years ago, with evidence of patient survival. Ancient texts describe antiseptics, anesthetics, and diagnostic techniques that would not reappear in Western medicine until the modern era. Much of this knowledge vanished during periods of social collapse and religious oppression. Even sound and vibration may have been technologies of the ancient world. At sites like Göbekli Tepe, massive stone pillars arranged in circular enclosures predate agriculture itself. Their layout suggests acoustic properties designed to amplify sound or induce resonance. Some researchers propose that ritual chanting within these structures could produce physical sensations or altered states of consciousness. Whether symbolic or functional, the understanding of sound, space, and human perception appears intentional and sophisticated. And then there is astronomy. Ancient civilizations tracked celestial movements with extraordinary precision. Stone circles, temples, and pyramids aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and stellar events. The Maya calculated planetary cycles more accurately than early modern astronomers. The ancient Egyptians oriented their monuments to true north with an error margin smaller than many modern buildings. These were not coincidences. They were the result of systematic observation, mathematics, and tools we no longer possess. What ties all of this together is not mystery for mystery's sake. It is a pattern. Advanced knowledge appears. It is applied at scale. It works. Then something happens. Collapse, conquest, climate change, ideological shift, and the knowledge disappears. Later civilizations inherit the structures but not the understanding. They imitate without comprehension, repair without mastery, and eventually they forget. We call the ancient world primitive because it comforts us to believe we are superior. But the stones do not lie. The metals do not lie. The machines pulled from the sea do not lie. What vanished was not intelligence. It was continuity. And as we stand at the peak of our own technological age, dependent on systems few truly understand, we must ask an uncomfortable question. If our civilization were to collapse tomorrow, what knowledge would survive? What would future civilizations find if they dug to the ruins of our world thousands of years from now? Skyscrapers reduced to twisted steel, data centers long silent, satellites fallen from the sky, devices whose purpose could never be guessed without electricity, without networks, without the invisible systems that make them function. Our technology, for all its power, is fragile. Strip away the infrastructure, and becomes incomprehensible debris. The ancient world understood something we often forget. Durability was as important as innovation. Their greatest technologies were not always the most complex, but the most resilient. And yet, even those were not immune to loss. Take transportation. The ancient Romans built over 400,000 kilometers of roads, many of which still exist today as foundations beneath modern highways. These roads were engineered with layered construction, precise drainage, and stone surfacing that resisted erosion for centuries. Roman vehicles moved efficiently across an empire spanning 3 continents. And yet, after the fall of Rome, much of this engineering knowledge vanished. Medieval Europe struggled to maintain even a fraction of the infrastructure Romans once managed effortlessly. In some cases, roads fell into disuse not because they were poorly built, but because the administrative systems that maintained them collapsed. The technology was not just physical, it was organizational. Lose the bureaucracy, the logistics, the trained workforce, and the knowledge becomes useless. This pattern repeats again and again. In the ancient Near East, complex mechanical devices powered by water and steam were described by engineers like Hero of Alexandria. Automatic doors, coin-operated machines, pressure-driven fountains. Devices that demonstrate a deep understanding of mechanics and pneumatics. These were not toys. They were proofs of concept. The foundation of an industrial revolution that never came. Why? Because technology does not evolve in isolation. It requires social demand, economic incentive, and political stability. The ancient world had the knowledge, but not always the conditions to push it further. When those fragile conditions collapsed, so did the technologies tied to them. In Mesoamerica, civilizations like the Maya developed advanced mathematics, including the concept of zero, centuries before it appeared in Europe. Their calendar systems tracked time with astonishing accuracy. Their cities were carefully planned around astronomical alignments. And yet, despite this intellectual sophistication, much of their written knowledge was destroyed after European contact. Spanish conquistadors and missionaries burned codices, dismissing them as pagan. What remains today is only a fraction of what once existed. Entire scientific traditions erased in a single generation. In ancient Africa, ironworking emerged independently in multiple regions. Some furnaces achieved temperatures high enough to produce steel, using techniques modern metallurgy still studies. The Nok culture, the kingdom of Kush, and other societies developed iron tools and weapons that reshaped agriculture and warfare. But many of these methods were never written down. They were passed orally through apprenticeship. When societies fragmented, the knowledge fragmented with them. Even navigation, a technology essential for survival, has suffered loss. Ancient Polynesian navigators crossed vast stretches of open ocean without compasses, sextants, or maps. They read the stars, ocean swells, bird flight patterns, and cloud formations to determine position with astonishing accuracy. This knowledge was stored not in books, but in memory, song, and ritual. When colonial powers disrupted these cultures, much of this navigational science disappeared. It is only now, through painstaking cultural revival, that fragments are being recovered. And then there are the technologies we still cannot explain at all. Vitrified forts in Scotland and Europe. Stone walls melted as if exposed to extreme heat. Some propose intentional vitrification for strength. Others suggest catastrophic fires or unknown energy sources. The temperatures required exceed what open fires should produce. No consensus exists. In Egypt, drill holes in granite show spiral tool marks consistent with high-speed drilling under pressure. Modern experiments suggest the tools required would outperform what copper and sand should achieve. Something does not add up. In ancient Peru, skulls exhibit evidence of complex cranial surgery, including bone grafting, with survival rates astonishingly high for the time. How were pain, infection, and blood loss controlled so effectively? Each anomaly on its own might be dismissed. Together, they form a troubling picture. The ancient world was not a single civilization, but many. They rose independently, separated by oceans, yet solved similar engineering problems in strikingly similar ways. Massive stone construction, astronomical alignment, advanced metallurgy, water management, precision craftsmanship. Convergence suggests necessity, and necessity drives innovation. But innovation alone is not enough to ensure survival. Climate change played a devastating role in the loss of ancient technologies. Prolonged droughts collapsed agricultural systems. Floods destroyed cities. Shifting coastlines erased ports and trade networks. When environmental stability vanished, so did the surplus needed to support specialists, the engineers, scholars, and craftsmen who sustained advanced knowledge. War accelerated the process. Conquerors rarely value the technologies of those they defeat. Skilled workers are enslaved or killed. Sacred knowledge is suppressed. Institutions are dismantled. In some cases, technology is intentionally destroyed to prevent rebellion or erase cultural identity. And ideology can be just as destructive. At various points in history, scientific inquiry was viewed as heretical, dangerous, or unnecessary. Knowledge associated with previous regimes or belief systems was rejected. Texts were banned. Practices abandoned. Progress reversed. The loss of ancient technology was not always accidental. Sometimes it was deliberate. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is this. Many ancient technologies were likely so integrated into daily life that they were never considered worth recording. Just as we do not document how to tie our shoes or turn on a light, ancient people may have assumed their methods would always be known. That assumption proved fatal, because when continuity breaks, knowledge does not pause. It resets. Today, we dig through ruins and marvel at achievements we cannot fully explain. We reconstruct fragments, propose theories, run simulations. But reconstruction is not recovery. We may never truly rediscover what was lost, not because we lack intelligence, but because the context is gone. Technology is not just tools. It is culture, training, purpose, continuity. And continuity is fragile. As we push deeper into the future, building systems more complex than ever before, the ancient world offers a silent warning carved into stone and buried beneath sand. Advanced knowledge does not guarantee survival, and progress is not permanent. If the technologies of the ancient world could vanish forever, what makes us believe ours will not? There is a temptation to believe that the ancient world reached the ceiling of development and simply stopped, that their technologies were impressive for their time, but ultimately limited. Yet the evidence suggests something far more unsettling. Many ancient technologies did not fail because they were ineffective. They failed because the systems that supported them collapsed. Knowledge does not disappear all at once. It erodes. First, specialists lose funding. Then apprentices are no longer trained. Workshops fall silent. Techniques become simplified. Precision is replaced by approximation. Over generations, what was once exact becomes ritual, and what was once functional becomes symbolic. By the time historians arrive, only echoes remain. In ancient Egypt, later dynasties struggled to replicate the engineering feats of their predecessors. Pyramids built centuries after the Great Pyramid are smaller, less precise, and structurally inferior. The knowledge did not advance. It degraded. The same civilization, the same land, yet diminishing capability. This alone shatters the myth of linear progress. The same pattern appears in stone construction across the ancient world. Early megalithic sites often display greater precision than later ones. The oldest stones are the largest, the most finely fitted, the most technically impressive. Later additions rely on smaller blocks, mortar, and simpler designs. This suggests that peak knowledge came early, followed by gradual loss rather than steady improvement. Why would the earliest builders be the most capable? One possibility is inheritance. that early civilizations inherited knowledge from even older cultures. Cultures now completely erased from history, not legends, but real societies whose traces survive only in anomalous construction techniques and unexplained artifacts. Sea levels have risen dramatically since the end of the last ice age. Entire coastal civilizations may now lie submerged beneath the ocean. Ports, workshops, and cities lost to time not because they failed, but because geography changed. Underwater ruins discovered near India, Japan, and the Mediterranean hint at advanced societies predating recorded history. If even a fraction of ancient technological development occurred in now submerged regions, then our understanding of early human capability is incomplete by default. And then there is the problem of materials. Ancient engineers often work with materials we no longer prioritize. Stone, bronze, natural polymers, organic compounds, materials that endure without constant maintenance. Modern technology, by contrast, depends on rare elements, refined supply chains, and complex manufacturing processes. Remove any one component, and the system fails. Some ancient technologies may have relied on biological or chemical processes we have not recognized as technology at all. Consider ancient dyes that have not faded in thousands of years. Pigments whose chemical composition remains stable despite exposure to sunlight, moisture, and time. The methods used to produce them are often poorly understood, involving complex fermentation or mineral processing techniques lost when synthetic dyes took over. Consider ancient glass. Roman glass could self-heal at the molecular level, preventing cracks from spreading. This property was only discovered recently through microscopic analysis. The glassmakers who produced it had no modern theory of material science, yet they achieved results we are only now beginning to appreciate. Was this accidental? Or was it empirical knowledge refined over generations and then forgotten? In ancient warfare, technology reached levels that shaped the fate of empires. Greek fire, a weapon capable of burning on water, terrified enemies for centuries. Its exact composition was a state secret, guarded so closely that when the Byzantine Empire fell, the formula vanished entirely. Despite modern chemistry, Greek fire has never been definitively replicated. This is not an isolated case. Damascus steel blades displayed patterns and strength that modern metallurgists struggle for decades to reproduce. The technique relied on precise temperature control and trace elements introduced during smelting. When trade routes shifted and raw materials changed, the knowledge ceased to function. Craftsmen could no longer achieve the same results, even if they remembered the steps. Technology is context-dependent. Remove the right climate, the right cultural framework, and it collapses. In ancient agriculture, selective breeding produced crops uniquely adapted to local environments. Terrace farming systems controlled erosion and water distribution with stunning efficiency. Raised fields, chinampas, and irrigation networks supported massive populations without depleting the soil. When these systems were abandoned, landscapes degraded rapidly. Modern agriculture, despite its scale, often fails to achieve the same sustainability. We assume newer means better. History suggests otherwise. The disappearance of ancient technology also forces us to confront how knowledge is valued. In many ancient societies, technology was inseparable from spirituality. Astronomy guided ritual. Architecture embodied cosmology. Engineering served religious purpose. When belief systems changed, technologies tied to them were abandoned or misunderstood. Temples became ruins. Instruments became relics. Knowledge once alive became taboo. This fusion of science and belief may seem alien to the modern mind, but it was deeply effective. It ensured that knowledge was preserved through ritual and tradition, but it also made it vulnerable. Change a belief, and the knowledge collapses with it. One of the greatest illusions of the modern world is that we are immune to this process. We trust in redundancy, in backups, in global networks. But complexity itself is a vulnerability. The more interconnected a system becomes, the more points of failure it contains. The ancient world offers a sobering lesson. Technology does not vanish because it is inferior. It vanishes because it is unsupported. And perhaps the most haunting aspect of lost ancient technology is this. We often find the results, but never the tools. We see the stone cut, but not the blade. The metal alloyed, but not the furnace. The calculation made, but not the instrument. This suggests that many ancient technologies were transient, built from materials that did not survive time. Wood, rope, leather, organic compounds. Tools that decomposed while their work endured. Imagine a civilization whose most advanced technology left no durable trace. How would we ever know it existed? We are left piecing together fragments, interpreting scars in stone, anomalies in artifacts, and gaps in historical records. Every discovery raises more questions than it answers. The ancient world is not silent because it had nothing to say. It is silent because we have lost a language to understand it. And the deeper we dig, the more we realize that what vanished forever may not have been technology alone, but an entirely different way of thinking about the world. There is an uncomfortable truth hidden beneath the ruins of the ancient world. Intelligence is not rare. Opportunity is. Human beings have always possessed curiosity, creativity, and problem-solving ability. What changes across time is whether those qualities are allowed to flourish, supported, and transmitted. The ancient world was not filled with geniuses beyond our comprehension. It was filled with societies that gave knowledge room to mature before abruptly cutting it off. This is why so many ancient technologies appear fully formed, then disappear without a trace of gradual evolution. We expect to see experimentation, trial and error, primitive versions leading to refined ones. Instead, we often encounter sudden excellence followed by decline. Precision appears, reaches its peak, then erodes. This is not how invention dies. This is how inheritance is lost. In some cases, technology may have been deliberately restricted. Certain ancient cultures limited advanced knowledge to priesthoods, guilds, or royal circles. Astronomy, engineering, medicine, and mathematics were guarded, encoded in symbolism, or taught only through initiation. This preserved accuracy, but reduced resilience. When the guardians fell, the knowledge vanished with them. Secrecy protects power, but secrecy also ensures extinction. The ancient world understood forces we still struggle to fully explain, not mystically, but practically. They observed nature with patience we no longer possess. Generations spent lifetimes refining single techniques. There was no pressure to innovate rapidly. Progress was slow, deliberate, and deeply empirical. That patience allowed discoveries modern science would struggle to stumble upon. Acoustic resonance in stone chambers. Natural chemical reactions harnessed for preservation. Mechanical advantage achieved through geometry rather than engines. Energy captured through gravity, water flow, and pressure. These were not crude substitutes for modern technology. They were optimized for the world as it existed then, sustainable, locally sourced, and astonishingly effective. Modern archaeology often fails to recognize these methods because it looks for familiar signatures. We search for metal tools, written instructions, standardized parts. But ancient technology often left none of these behind. Instead, it left outcomes: perfect alignment, extreme durability, repeatable results. And outcomes do not explain themselves. Consider ancient timekeeping. Stone structures marking solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles appear across continents. They required long-term observation, mathematical modeling, and precise construction. Yet the instruments used to calculate these alignments, sighting devices, measuring rods, calibration systems, are almost entirely absent from the archaeological record. Why? Because they were likely made of perishable materials: wood, fiber, bone, organic compound that decayed while stone endured. We mistake absence of tools for absence of knowledge. In reality, the tools vanished, not the intelligence. In ancient medicine, plant-based pharmacology reached extraordinary levels of sophistication. Many modern drugs are derived from compounds known to ancient healers. Yet the preparation methods, the ratios, timings, combinations, were rarely written down in full. They were learned through practice, passed orally, refined through experience. When those traditions were interrupted, the knowledge evaporated. Textbooks cannot replace apprenticeship. Databases cannot replace lived understanding. And this is the heart of what vanished forever. Not just machines, not just formulas, but systems of knowing, ways of observing the world, ways of teaching, ways of remembering. Ancient technology often worked in harmony with environment rather than dominance over it. Cities were built where water naturally flowed. Structures aligned with climate. Materials were chosen for longevity rather than convenience. When modern observers fail to recognize this philosophy, they misinterpret ancient achievements as accidental or symbolic. But nothing that precise is accidental. The tragedy is not that ancient technology was lost. The tragedy is that it was forgotten long enough for us to believe it never existed. Today, fragments are being rediscovered. Roman concrete studied anew. Ancient steel analyzed under microscopes. Acoustic properties tested in stone chambers. Navigation techniques reconstructed from oral histories. Each rediscovery challenges the assumption that we stand alone at the summit of progress. We are not the first to master complexity. We are simply the latest. And that realization carries a warning. If the ancient world, with its durable materials, localized knowledge, and generational continuity, could lose so much, what does that say about us? Our technology is powerful, but brittle. Our knowledge vast, but specialized. Our systems efficient, but fragile. A disruption does not need to erase everything. It only needs to break continuity. The ancient world did not fall because it lacked intelligence. It fell because intelligence was not enough to save memory. And memory, once broken, does not heal. The technologies of the ancient world vanished not in fire or flood alone, but in silence, in the slow forgetting of how things were done, in the assumption that someone else would remember. No civilization believes it will be forgotten until it is. And beneath every ancient ruin lies the same unanswered question, carved not in stone, but in absence. What else did they know that we will never know again? There is a tendency, when confronted with the lost technologies of the ancient world, to search for a single catastrophic explanation, a great disaster, a sudden collapse, a moment when everything ended. But history rarely works that way. What vanished was not erased overnight. It slipped away quietly, piece by piece, generation by generation. Knowledge is not immortal. It must be actively remembered. In ancient societies, the survival of technology depended on stability. Long periods of peace allowed craftsmen to refine techniques. Predictable seasons sustained agriculture. Strong institutions trained specialists. When these conditions faltered, even briefly, the chain weakened. And once broken, it was nearly impossible to repair. Take ancient engineering traditions that required decades of training. A master stonecutter might spend an entire lifetime perfecting a single method. If war or famine removed one generation of apprentices, the knowledge died with the master. There were no manuals detailed enough to replace lived experience. No diagrams precise enough to convey touch, pressure, timing, intuition. Modern science underestimates intuition because it cannot easily measure it. The ancient world relied on it. Many ancient technologies were tactile. They depended on feel rather than formula. Temperature judged by color. Material readiness sensed by resistance. Structural balance understood through sound and vibration. These were skills embedded in the body, not the page. When the bodies were gone, the knowledge was gone. This is why so many reconstructions fail. We replicate the tools, but not the training. We follow the steps, but not the understanding. We imitate the form, but miss the function. The ancient world was not primitive. It was embodied. There is also the uncomfortable possibility that some ancient technologies were never intended to spread, that they were designed for limited use, bound to specific places, people, or purposes. Sacred technologies, contextual technologies, methods that only work within precise environmental or cultural conditions. Remove them from that context, and they fail. This may explain why certain ancient methods cannot be reproduced today, even when materials and processes appear identical. The missing element may not be mechanical, but environmental, or social, or psychological. Modern observers often overlook the human element entirely. Ancient builders did not work in isolation. They worked collectively, synchronized through rhythm, chant, ritual, and shared intent. Labor was coordinated through sound, timing through music, effort through ceremony. These practices were not superstition. They were systems of synchronization that enhanced efficiency and precision. Remove the ritual, and you remove the coordination. What we label as religion may have been operating as technology. This does not diminish the ancient world. It elevates it. They understood that human behavior was part of the machine. The loss of ancient technology, then, was not merely technical. It was cultural. When belief systems shifted, when social structures changed, when languages evolved or disappeared, the frameworks that sustained knowledge collapsed. A technique recorded in a dead language is a locked door. A symbol divorced from its meaning is an empty gesture. Even writing itself was a fragile safeguard. Many ancient scripts were lost entirely, rendering surviving texts unreadable for centuries. Linear, it remains undeciphered. Entire libraries exist in silence, their words visible but inaccessible. Knowledge preserved, yet functionally lost. And time is relentless. Stone survives. Metal corrodes. Organic matter vanishes. We inherit the illusion that what survives is what mattered most. But survival is arbitrary. It favors durability, not importance. The most critical technologies may have left no trace at all. This raises a disturbing possibility that the ancient world possessed technologies we will never even know to look for, not because they were impossible, but because they left no scars in stone. Imagine medical techniques using biodegradable tools, energy systems based on temporary structures, mechanical processes relying on materials that return to nature. From the perspective of archaeology, these technologies never existed, and yet their effects may be visible in population growth, urban planning, or unexplained leaps in capability. The silence in the record is not proof of absence. It is proof of loss. As we piece together fragments of ancient technology, we must confront the limits of our understanding. We are outsiders, separated not just by time, but by worldview. We analyze with modern assumptions, modern priorities, modern definitions of technology. But technology is not universal. It reflects the values of its creators. The ancient world valued endurance, harmony, and continuity. We value speed, expansion, and novelty. They built for centuries. We build for upgrades. And perhaps that is why their ruins still stand. The vanished technologies of the ancient world are not a challenge to modern intelligence. They are a challenge to modern humility. They remind us that progress is not guaranteed, that brilliance does not ensure survival, and that forgetting is easier than remembering. The past does not accuse us. It warns us, because every lost civilization believed its knowledge would last forever, and every one of them was wrong. The ancient world is not asking to be worshipped. It is asking to be understood. And the greatest lesson it leaves behind is not what it built, but how easily it was all forgotten. When we speak of ancient technology, we often imagine objects, machines, tools, structures. But the deepest losses were not things. They were processes, ways of thinking that shape how knowledge was discovered, tested, and preserved. The ancient world did not separate science from life. Observation was constant. Experimentation was embedded in daily activity. Farmers studied soil and weather with generational precision. Builders learned stone not from theory, but from failure repeated over decades. Healers refined treatments not through controlled trials, but through lived consequence. This created a form of knowledge that was intensely practical, but difficult to abstract. Modern science excels at abstraction. Equations replace experience. Models replace memory. This is powerful, but it is also detached. Ancient knowledge was inseparable from place, body, and time. Remove any one of those, and the knowledge dissolved. This is why ancient technologies often resist modern replication. We isolate variables. They integrated systems. We seek universal rules. They mastered local truths. A technique perfected in one valley might fail entirely in another. Instead of forcing uniformity, ancient cultures adapted endlessly. Their technology evolved not toward standardization, but toward harmony with specific environments. And this adaptability made their knowledge fragile. When climates shifted, when populations migrated, when environments changed beyond recognition, the technologies bound to them lost relevance. And then memory. In some cases, ancient knowledge may have been intentionally allowed to fade. Certain technologies, once their purpose was fulfilled, may have been abandoned rather than preserved. Temporary solutions to temporary problems. Methods meant for a specific era, not eternity. Without perceived future value, there was no effort to transmit them forward. We assume all useful knowledge should be saved. The ancient world did not share that assumption. This difference in values is crucial. Modern civilization is obsessed with preservation. We archive relentlessly, storing information far beyond our ability to interpret it. But ancient societies curated knowledge. They chose what to pass on. And sometimes those choices were fatal. A civilization does not lose its greatest knowledge first. It loses what it no longer understands. Once meaning fades, preservation stops. A ritual becomes habit. A habit becomes tradition. A tradition becomes superstition. And superstition is eventually discarded. This is how technology dies without anyone noticing. We see this even today. Entire programming languages become obsolete within decades. Skills once essential vanish within a generation. Knowledge that is not used is not remembered, no matter how well documented. The ancient world had no illusion of permanence, but it may have underestimated fragility. There is also the question of scale. Some ancient technologies were likely never widespread. They may have been rare, experimental, or limited to elite projects. Monumental architecture draws attention because it is visible. But smaller, more subtle technologies, tools of measurement, calibration devices, training systems, were used quietly and left no monuments behind. History remembers what is loud. Technology is often silent, and silence is easily erased. As archaeology advances, we are beginning to see patterns that challenge long-held assumptions, evidence of standardized measurement systems across vast regions, repeating ratios embedded in architecture, mathematical relationships consistent across cultures that never met. This suggests knowledge transmission on a scale we once thought impossible. Trade routes did not only carry goods, they carried ideas. And ideas, once detached from their origin, can evolve or disappear. The ancient world may have been far more interconnected than we allow ourselves to believe. Shared solutions to shared problems, adapted locally, refined independently. A global conversation conducted slowly, across generations. When that conversation stopped, knowledge fractured, and fragments are all we have left. What vanished forever was not a golden age of perfection. It was something far more human, a continuous dialogue between observation and experience, between environment and imagination, between necessity and patience. We replace that dialogue with speed. We innovate faster than we can understand. We build systems we cannot fully explain. We depend on technologies no single person can repair. The ancient world would have recognized this as dangerous because they knew something we are only beginning to relearn. That technology survives only as long as people can live it, teach it, and adapt it. Once it becomes abstracted beyond human scale, it becomes vulnerable, and vulnerability invites forgetting. The ruins of the ancient world do not mock us. They do not demand awe. They simply endure. They remind us that intelligence is cyclical, that mastery can be temporary, that progress can reverse. The technology of the ancient world vanished forever not because it was weak, but because it was human, and humanity forgets. Perhaps the most difficult idea to accept is that loss is not an anomaly in human history. It is the rule. For every technology we remember, there are countless others that left no recognizable trace. The ancient world was not moving blindly toward modernity. It was exploring countless paths at once. Some led to monumental stone architecture, others to metallurgy, medicine, astronomy, navigation, acoustics, chemistry, agriculture, and systems we may never fully identify as technology at all. History only preserves the paths that hardened into ruins. Everything else dissolved. This is why ancient innovation often feels alien. It did not follow the trajectory we expect. It solved problems we no longer face, using constraints we no longer accept. The goal was not expansion without limit, but balance within known boundaries. The ancient engineer did not ask how to dominate nature. They asked how to cooperate with it. And cooperation leaves fewer scars. When we examine vanished ancient technologies, we must also confront the arrogance of assuming that complexity always looks mechanical. Some of the most effective ancient systems were biological, ecological, or social. Forests managed as living machines. Crops bred for resilience rather than yield. Cities designed to cool themselves through airflow and shade. Communities structured to transmit skills without written instruction. These are technologies, but they are invisible to a culture that equates technology with hardware. Modern observers look for gears and engines. Ancient societies often built systems. Systems that required participation, memory, and continuity. Once participation stopped, the system failed. This is why conquest was so devastating to ancient knowledge. Invaders could occupy cities, seize monuments, and control land, but they could not instantly understand how those systems functioned. They inherited the shell, not the substance. Irrigation networks silted up. Calendars lost synchronization. Buildings stood, but their purpose was forgotten. Within a few generations, the technology might as well never have existed. The ancient world was filled with technologies that did not survive contact with a different worldview. And worldview is everything. A society that values efficiency will discard ritual. A society that values power will discard balance. A society that values speed will discard patience. Each choice feels rational in the moment. Each choice carries a cost paid later. The vanishing of ancient technology was not a single tragedy. It was millions of small decisions, repeated over centuries, until nothing remained to protect the knowledge. No one wakes up intending to forget how to build wonders. They simply stop teaching it. They stop because it feels unnecessary, because resources are scarce, because priorities change, because survival demands something else. And once teaching stops, the countdown begins. Within one generation, mastery weakens. Within two, it fragments. Within three, it becomes myth. This is why ancient texts often describe technologies as gifts from gods or lost ancestors. When explanation disappears, reverence takes its place. Myth is not ignorance. It is memory without method. We mock the myths because we no longer understand the methods. But myth is what remains when technology outlives explanation. Today, we are doing the same thing. We rely on systems we cannot personally rebuild. We trust processes we do not fully grasp. We assume continuity will always exist. The ancient world assumed the same. Their failure was not moral. It was structural. They believed stability was permanent. It never is. The vanished technologies of the ancient world force us to confront a final, unsettling possibility that we are not uniquely advanced, only uniquely documented. That future historians may look back at our age not as a pinnacle, but as a brief surge before another forgetting. Data decays. Formats change. Infrastructure collapses. Stone remembers. Silicon does not. The ancient world built in stone because it expected time to be an enemy. We build in code because we assume time will be kind. History has never rewarded that assumption. What vanished forever was not just ancient machines, techniques, or formulas. It was an attitude toward knowledge, one that understood fragility, respected limits, and valued transmission over accumulation. The ruins are still there, waiting, not to be admired, not to be mythologized, but to remind us that technology is temporary, that memory is fragile, and that forgetting is always closer than we think. There's a final layer to the disappearance of ancient technology that is rarely addressed, because it is deeply uncomfortable. Some knowledge may not have been lost by accident, neglect, or collapse alone. Some of it may have been intentionally abandoned, not destroyed, not forgotten, but let go. Ancient societies understood that technology reshapes the human relationship with power. Tools change who controls resources, who governs labor, who holds authority. Certain technologies destabilize social balance. Others accelerate inequality. Some grant influence too concentrated to be sustainable. The ancient world may have recognized limits that we refuse to acknowledge. There are historical hints of this restraint. Technologies developed, demonstrated, then deliberately restricted. knowledge classified as sacred, practices forbidden outside ritual contexts, tools locked behind moral or cosmological frameworks. This was not fear of progress. It was fear of consequence. Modern civilization treats capability as justification. If something can be done, it should be done. The ancient world often asked a different question. Should it be done? And if the answer was uncertain, the knowledge might be buried, not in the ground, but in silence. This reframes loss not as failure, but as choice. A technology that destabilizes society faster than it can adapt is not progress. It is acceleration without control. Ancient cultures that value continuity above expansion may have decided that some paths were too dangerous to pursue indefinitely. Without written manifestos, these decisions vanish from the record. What remains is absence, and absence looks like ignorance to those who arrive later. But absence can also be restraint. The ancient world lived closer to collapse than we do. They understood fragility intimately. A few bad harvests could end a civilization. A single invasion could erase generations of knowledge. Survival required long-term thinking. Modern civilization has been buffered by abundance. We mistake that buffer for permanence. This is why the ancient world invested so heavily in redundancy that did not rely on complexity. Oral transmission, monumental markers, cultural embedding, knowledge stored in ritual, architecture, landscape. These were not primitive substitutes for writing. They were fail-safes. When writing failed, ritual remembered. When tools vanished, structures taught. When explanation was lost, alignment endured. But even these systems had limits. Once meaning detached from practice, even monuments became mute. Stone circles stood, but no one remembered why. Pyramids endured, but their methods were mythologized. Calendars remained, but lost synchronization. Eventually, all that survived was awe, and awe is the final stage of forgotten knowledge. We stand in that stage now. We marvel at ancient achievements while quietly assuming superiority. But superiority without continuity is meaningless. The ancient world achieved greatness without fossil fuels, without global supply chains, without digital memory. They failed not because they lacked intelligence, but because intelligence alone cannot defeat entropy, and neither can ours. The vanished technologies of the ancient world are not an indictment of the past. They are a mirror held up to the present. They show us what happens when knowledge is concentrated, when transmission is fragile, when systems outgrow understanding. They show us that no civilization is immune to forgetting, not even one that believes it has recorded everything. Because recording is not remembering, storing is not understanding, and access is not mastery. The ancient world mastered what it lived. We live what we barely understand. And one day, if continuity breaks, future minds may stare at the remains of our cities with the same confusion we feel now. They will ask how we built such things, what powered them, why we abandoned methods that seemed so advanced. They will speculate. They will theorize. They will argue. And they will never fully know, just as we will never fully know what vanished before us. The technology of the ancient world did not disappear because it was unimportant. It disappeared because importance alone does not guarantee survival. Only memory does. And memory, without care, always fades. There's a quiet irony in how we search for lost ancient technology. We dig deeper, excavate further, analyze harder. Yet the answers may not lie buried beneath the earth at all. They may lie in what was never meant to endure. The ancient world did not design its most important systems to survive collapse. It designed them to function during life. This distinction matters. A bridge is built to be crossed, not worshipped. A tool is made to be used, not preserved. A method exists to solve a problem, not to impress the future. When the problem disappears, the method often disappears with it. Modern archaeology favors permanence. Stone, metal, fire, clay, these survive. But ancient technology often lived in cycles. Seasonal constructions, temporary installations, devices assembled, used, dismantled, reused. Knowledge in motion, not frozen in form. A technology that leaves no ruins leaves no history. And history mistakes silence for absence. The ancient world may have solved problems we no longer recognize as problems. Environmental balance, social cohesion, long-term sustainability. Technologies built to regulate population, resource use, and human behavior itself. These are uncomfortable ideas for a modern audience. We prefer technologies that amplify power, speed, and growth. The ancient world often saw technologies that limited them. Limits are not failures. They are controls. The disappearance of ancient technologies may reflect the disappearance of ancient priorities. When later civilizations inherited the world, they inherited different needs, different values, different pressures. Technologies that once made sense became irrelevant or even obstructive. Why maintain a complex irrigation system if conquest brings tribute instead of crops? Why preserve astronomical precision if ritual calendars no longer govern society? Why train master craftsmen if mass labor can approximate results cheaply? Efficiency replaces mastery. Approximation replaces precision, and the difference is forgotten. The ancient world understood something we rarely admit. Technology shapes culture, but culture also decides which technologies deserve to survive. The loss of ancient technology was not simply caused by collapse. It was accelerated by replacement. New systems displaced old ones before they were fully understood. Iron replaced bronze. Mortar replaced precision stone fitting. Written law replaced oral memory. Centralized authority replaced distributed knowledge. Each shift brought advantages. Each shift carried loss. And loss accumulates. Over centuries, these accumulated losses transformed civilizations so thoroughly that earlier achievements became unrecognizable. Later generations looked at ancient ruins and assumed impossibility because they no longer possessed the cultural framework that made those achievements normal. What feels miraculous today was once routine. That realization should unsettle us, because it suggests that what feels miraculous to future generations about our world may not be our intelligence, but our blindness. They may marvel not at what we built, but at how completely we forgot how to maintain it. The ancient world teaches us that collapse does not require ignorance. It requires complacency. It requires assuming that someone else will remember, that someone else will teach, that someone else will preserve. Eventually, there is no one else left. And so the knowledge vanishes, not in catastrophe, but in delegation. This is why the technology of the ancient world vanished forever, not because it was too weak, not because it was too simple, but because it was too human, dependent on continuity, dependent on memory, dependent on care. Stone can survive neglect. Knowledge cannot. And that is the final lesson written into every ancient ruin, not a warning about the past, but about the future we are building now. There's a quiet irony in how we search for lost ancient technology. We dig deeper, excavate further, analyze harder. Yet the answers may not lie buried beneath the earth at all. They may lie in what was never meant to endure. The ancient world did not design its most important systems to survive collapse. It designed them to function during life. This distinction matters. A bridge is built to be crossed, not worshipped. A tool is made to be used, not preserved. A method exists to solve a problem, not to impress the future. When the problem disappears, the method often disappears with it. Modern archaeology favors permanence. Stone, metal, fire, clay, these survive. But ancient technology often lived in cycles. Seasonal constructions, temporary installations, devices assembled, used, dismantled, reused. Knowledge in motion, not frozen in form. A technology that leaves no ruins leaves no history. And history mistakes silence for absence. The ancient world may have solved problems we no longer recognize as problems. Environmental balance, social cohesion, long-term sustainability. Technologies built to regulate population, resource use, and human behavior itself. These are uncomfortable ideas for a modern audience. We prefer technologies that amplify power, speed, and growth. The ancient world often saw technologies that limited them. Limits are not failures. They are controls. The disappearance of ancient technologies may reflect the disappearance of ancient priorities. When later civilizations inherited the world, they inherited different needs, different values, different pressures. Technologies that once made sense became irrelevant or even obstructive. Why maintain a complex irrigation system if conquest brings tribute instead of crops? Why preserve astronomical precision if ritual calendars no longer govern society? Why train master craftsmen if mass labor can approximate results cheaply? Efficiency replaces mastery. Approximation replaces precision, and the difference is forgotten. The ancient world understood something we rarely admit. Technology shapes culture, but culture also decides which technologies deserve to survive. The loss of ancient technology was not simply caused by collapse. It was accelerated by replacement. New systems displaced old ones before they were fully understood. Iron replaced bronze. Mortar replaced precision stone fitting. Written law replaced oral memory. Centralized authority replaced distributed knowledge. Each shift brought advantages. Each shift carried loss. And loss accumulates. Over centuries, these accumulated losses transformed civilizations so thoroughly that earlier achievements became unrecognizable. Later generations looked at ancient ruins and assumed impossibility because they no longer possessed the cultural framework that made those achievements normal. What feels miraculous today was once routine. That realization should unsettle us, because it suggests that what feels miraculous to future generations about our world may not be our intelligence, but our blindness. They may marvel not at what we built, but at how completely we forgot how to maintain it. The ancient world teaches us that collapse does not require ignorance. It requires complacency. It requires assuming that someone else will remember, that someone else will teach, that someone else will preserve. Eventually, there is no one else left. And so the knowledge vanishes, not in catastrophe, but in delegation. This is why the technology of the ancient world vanished forever, not because it was too weak, not because it was too simple, but because it was too human, dependent on continuity, dependent on memory, dependent on care. Stone can survive neglect. Knowledge cannot. And that is the final lesson written into every ancient ruin, not a warning about the past, but about the future we are building now. In the end, the most dangerous misconception about ancient technology is a belief that it belonged to a distant, inferior phase of humanity, that it was a stepping stone towards something better. This belief allows us to dismiss loss as necessary, forgetting as inevitable, and disappearance as progress. But the ancient world was not a prototype of us. It was a different answer to the same question. How should humans live with knowledge? Their answer was cautious, contextual, embedded in place and time. Knowledge was not separated from responsibility. Power was restrained by tradition. Innovation was measured against consequence. Our answer has been speed. We build faster than we can reflect. We adopt before we understand. We replace before we master. The ancient world would have recognized this as dangerous, not because technology is evil, but because imbalance is. Every vanished ancient technology is a reminder that advancement without continuity is a dead end. Consider once more the ruins scattered across the world. They are not the remains of failure. They are the remains of success that outlived its caretakers. The builders did their part. They solved the problems of their age. They created systems that worked. What they could not guarantee was inheritance. No civilization can. The future is not obligated to remember the past. And so the technologies of the ancient world vanish forever, not because they were flawed, but because forgetting is a natural state of humanity unless actively resisted. This is the truth written between the stones. Knowledge does not persist because it exists. It persists because it is loved, practiced, and protected. The ancient world lost its technologies the moment they became ordinary, the moment mastery was taken for granted, the moment survival demanded attention elsewhere. And one day, our technologies will face the same test, not of brilliance, but of memory. The ancient world whispers this lesson through silence, through gaps in history, through achievements we cannot fully explain. It does not ask us to rebuild its machines. It asks us to rethink our relationship with knowledge, because the greatest technology ever lost was not carved in stone or cast in metal. It was continuity. And once continuity is broken, everything else eventually follows. We are drawn to ancient ruins because they are tangible, visible reminders of achievement. They offer the comfort of permanence, walls that endure, monuments that outlast empires, inscriptions that survive the decay of time. But permanence is an illusion. Stone may endure, but understanding does not. The ancients built to last physically, yet their knowledge, their methods, their reasoning vanished silently. This is why studying ancient technology feels like listening to a conversation with a missing half. We see the results. We can measure dimensions, analyze materials, trace alignments, but we cannot hear the reasoning, the intuition, the choices behind every decision. What guided the angle of a pyramid, the curvature of a stone wall, the composition of an alloy? These questions persist because the answers were never recorded in a form that could survive the collapse of the cultures that created them. And yet, the silence is not empty. It carries patterns. It carries lessons. It carries the echoes of lives devoted to understanding the world and bending it toward human will, without destroying the natural balance. The technology of the ancient world was not merely functional. It was integrated, holistic, and deeply intelligent. It represented a mindset as much as a method, a philosophy of observing, experimenting, refining, and embedding knowledge within society, environment, and culture. We marvel at this integration today because we have largely lost the capacity for it. Modern knowledge is fragmented. Engineering, biology, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, they are specialized fields separated by language, ideology, and academic boundaries. Ancient knowledge was not compartmentalized. It was interwoven. A master builder could read the stars, understand the flow of rivers, calculate structural loads, and design instruments for observation, all in one mind. There's a kind of technology whose disappearance leaves a void far greater than any single artifact or ruin can reveal. Even now, millennia later, we see fragments of this knowledge in isolated techniques. The Antikythera mechanism hints at mechanical ingenuity unmatched for 1,000 years. Roman concrete continues to resist erosion in ways modern engineers struggle to replicate. The Inca terraces demonstrate hydraulic and agricultural mastery in fragile mountain environments. And yet, these glimpses are anomalies, scattered clues from civilizations that once thrived on the principle of integration. Why did it vanish? The reasons are complex. Environmental change, war, conquest, political upheaval, social shifts, and cultural transformation all played a role. But underlying every collapse was a simple truth. Knowledge is only as strong as the society that sustains it. Without transmission, without practice, without the cultural infrastructure to support understanding, even the most brilliant technologies fade. They do not disappear in an instant. They erode, weaken, fragment, and ultimately dissolve into myth. There is also a profound lesson about humility embedded in this history. We tend to view progress as linear, assuming that newer always means better. The ancients challenged this assumption. Their solutions, adapted to realities of their environment, were often more sustainable, more precise, and in some cases, more advanced than what followed. We inherit their ruins, but not their reasoning, their intuition, or their ability to live fully in accord with the systems they engineered. Our perspective is incomplete, and our certainty about human ingenuity is fragile. And therein lies the true cost of forgotten technology. It is not simply the loss of machines or methods. It is the loss of accumulated wisdom. Generations of observation, experimentation, and refinement disappeared because continuity was broken. Each vanishing technology represents a collapse of understanding that we may never fully reconstruct. Every stone, alloy, or inscription we uncover is a fragment of a larger, coherent system we may never piece together. Yet there is hope in recognizing this pattern. By studying the remnants of ancient technology, we are not merely cataloging curiosities. We are learning how knowledge itself can be made resilient. The ancients remind us that survival depends not on isolated brilliance, but on sustained transmission. Knowledge must be lived, taught, and embedded within society to endure. Awareness of fragility is the first step toward preserving the technologies we now consider commonplace for future generations. And so the ancient world speaks to us through its silence. Its vanished machines, lost method, and unexplained structures are not merely relics. They are warnings, guides, and inspirations. They teach us about human potential, the conditions necessary for mastery, and the terrifying ease with which even the greatest achievements can disappear. The echoes of their genius remain in stone, metal, and earth, waiting for those willing to listen beyond the ruins. to perceive not just what they built, but how and why they built it. Ultimately, the vanished technologies of the ancient world are more than relics. They are messages across time. They speak to us not only of what was possible, but of what is fragile, what must be nurtured, and what is easily lost. They remind us that human ingenuity alone is not enough. Survival requires continuity, understanding, and care. We marvel at the great monuments, the intricate devices, the complex systems. But the true marvel is not the stone, the metal, or the construction. The true marvel is the human intellect that conceived it, the social structures that transmitted it, and the foresight, patience, and persistence that allowed it to exist at all. And when these human factors fail, even the most advanced technology can vanish forever. The ancient world warns us that brilliance is not immortal. That knowledge, no matter how powerful, is only alive when it is lived, taught, and remembered. Without this, it decays quietly, leaving behind stone and metal as hollow witnesses to forgotten mastery. As we advance into the future, building technologies more complex than ever before, we must recognize this vulnerability. Every tool, every system, every method we create carries the same fragility. Without stewardship, without cultural integration, without active preservation, the most extraordinary achievements of our age could vanish as completely as the machines, devices, and methods of the ancients. The lesson is clear. Honor knowledge, practice it, teach it, and protect it. Technology is not merely about invention. It is about inheritance. And the greatest tragedy of the ancient world was not that it failed to innovate, but that it failed to sustain. We inherit their ruins. We inherit their mysteries. And we inherit their warning that what is not remembered today may be lost forever tomorrow. The vanished technologies of the ancient world endure not in stone, but in the questions they leave behind. Questions that challenge us to think differently, to act carefully, and to understand that human achievement is never permanent, only remembered. In remembering, we keep technology alive. In understanding, we honor those who came before. And in humility, we prepare for a future in which our own creations might one day vanish as silently, as completely, and as mysteriously as theirs. The ancient world is gone. Its technology is lost. Its knowledge has vanished forever. And yet in that loss, there is a lesson that transcends time. Brilliance is fleeting, memory is fragile, and the survival of knowledge depends entirely on us.